So football did not start in 2004. It is way older than we all think it is. Let's start with China, over 2,000 years ago. The game was called cuju, literally kickball. Han Dynasty soldiers used it to stay sharp between wars, a leather ball stuffed with feathers and hair, kicked between teams toward a small net strung between two poles. No hands, just feet, instinct, and the will not to lose in front of your commanding officer. Cuju wasn't alone. Humans, it turns out, have been inventing versions of kick a ball. In ancient Greece, they played episkiros, a rough, shoving free-for-all. The Romans made their own version, harpastum, and made it bloodier. In Japan, the aristocracy played kamari. No violence at all, just silk robes and players cooperating to keep a ball in the air. 3 continents. 3 completely different temperaments. One shared, stubborn idea, a ball and feet, and the refusal to use your hands. None of these games are football. Not yet. There's no shared rulebook connecting cuju to kamari, no ref blowing a whistle across the Silk Road. What connects them isn't history, it's instinct. Every culture that ever had a round object and open space eventually asked the same question: what happens if we kick it? That instinct is the real starting point of this story. Not a rulebook, not a stadium. A pattern repeating itself for 2,000 years before anyone thought to write it down, and about to collide in medieval Europe with something a lot less elegant than silk robes and military drills. Now let's fast forward 1,000 years past. The instinct hasn't gone anywhere, it's just gotten a lot less civilized. By medieval England, football wasn't a sport. It was a riot with a ball attached. Entire villages played against entire villages. Not 11 aside, hundreds, sometimes the whole town. The goal could be the opposing church, a landmark miles away. There was no field, no ref, no rule book. The only rule was, get the ball there by any means necessary. And this was taken literally. I mean, punching was normal. Kicking wasn't limited to the ball. Deaths weren't rare enough to be shocking, just rare enough to make the news. And for this exact reason, a lot of kings tried to ban it for 100 years. But every ban failed. People kept playing anyway, in fields, in streets, in graveyards after church. You see, this is part that's interesting. This game survived royal decrees, public bans, and its own body count. Nobody was paying those players. Nobody was selling tickets. There were no rules, no structure, nothing football has today. And people still couldn't stop playing it. Now here we arrive at the question. What was it about this particular chaos that refused to die? Because 200 years of bans didn't kill it. It just went underground, waiting for someone to finally write it down, again. We are in the 1800s by now. England's schools and universities were all playing their own version of this chaos. Eton had one set of rules. Rugby had another. Harrow had a third. If a student from one school played a student from another, they couldn't agree on the basics. Could you carry the ball? Could you trip someone? So in October 1863, a group of men met at a pub in London, the Freemasons' Tavern, to fix that. 11 clubs. One goal: write down a single set of rules everyone could agree on, but they couldn't, not fully. The sticking point was simple: hacking. Kicking an opponent in the shins was, at the time, considered a normal part of the game. One side wanted to keep it. The other wanted it gone. They couldn't agree, so they split. The clubs that wanted to keep carrying the ball and kicking shins walked away and eventually formed rugby football. The clubs that stayed wrote the rules that would become the Football Association. That split is the hinge this whole story turns on. One pub meeting, one disagreement about kicking shins, and football as we know it, no hands, no hacking, was born almost by accident. Not because it was the better idea, because it was the version that got written down first. And once it was written down, it could be taught, copied, exported. A folk chaos that had survived 1,000 years of royal bans finally had something it never had before. A rulebook simple enough to hand to a stranger on the other side of the world. Now we have made some progress. Some rules have been made. Surely now is the time football actually got a global recognition, but no. A rulebook is only powerful if people actually knows about the rules. In a time of no internet, it was not easy to make the rules known to the whole world. So in the 1870s, Britain was carrying it everywhere. Sailors, railway engineers, factory workers, merchants. British trade sent them all over the world, and they brought football with them. Not as policy, not as strategy. Just something to do after work. A ball, a flat patch of ground, a few rules, simple enough to teach a stranger in an afternoon. It landed in Argentina with British railway workers, in Brazil with sailors docking in Rio, in Italy with British expats in Genoa and Turin. Everywhere it landed, the same thing happened. Locals picked it up, made it their own, and got better at it than the people who brought it. By 1904, the game had spread far enough that it needed something bigger than the FA. 7 countries founded FIFA in Paris, and pointedly, England wasn't one of them. The country that invented the rules didn't even join for another 2 years. The game had outgrown its inventor. That outgrowing became official in 1930. Uruguay hosted, and won, the first World Cup. A small South American country, twice Olympic champion, beating the odds on home soil. It wasn't just a trophy, it was proof the export had worked. The colonizers' game now belonged to whoever played it, the best. Now football had left home. For the first 100 years, football was a game people played and occasionally watched from a fence. Then television found it. Broadcast rights turned matches into a product. Clubs stopped being neighborhood teams and started being businesses. European competitions gave the biggest clubs a stage bigger than their own countries. And in 1995, one court case, the Bosman ruling, quietly rewrote the sport. Players could now leave a club for free once their contract ended, and wages exploded overnight. That was the last piece. A folk chaos with no rules had become a fully rigged rulebook. A local pastime had become a global business. What was left to change was just scale. And scale is exactly what the next 30 years delivered. Messi and Ronaldo turned football into something closer to global celebrity than sport. 2 players, 2 decades, more individual attention than entire national teams used to get. Clubs stopped being owned by local businessmen and started being owned by sovereign wealth funds. States buying prestige, not just trophies. Data analytics crept into every tactical decision. VAR put a camera on every referee's call. And by the mid-2020s, the Saudi League was writing checks big enough to pull aging superstars away from Europe entirely. The money finding a new centre of gravity, the way it once found England, then Brazil, then Spain. Which brings the story back to where it started. 2,000 years ago, someone in Han China kicked a ball because it felt like something worth doing. No money, no cameras, no stakes beyond a soldier's afternoon. Today, that same instinct fills stadiums, moves billions of dollars, and turns teenagers into the most famous people on the planet. The rules changed, the business changed, the instinct never did.